the most gracious, the most merciful. Welcome back to another session of Finding God. This time, for now, we're looking only at Islam, but eventually we will cover Christianity and Buddhism and Hinduism and Judaism and every other religion and religious practice that we can to understand God better. Chapter 19, The Elephant. This is a common story that is present in Arabian history at that particular time, and I'm going to talk about the story first, and then I'm going to recite the chapter because this is an important story, and it goes like this: the story of the army of the elephants. This incident happened during the period of the birth year of Prophet Muhammad. Abraha al-Ashram was the governor of Yemen on behalf of the king of Ethiopia, as Yemen was a part of Ethiopia at that point of the kingdom. Abraha thought to build a house like the Kaaba in Mecca, in Sana'a, which was the capital of Yemen, and call the Arabs to perform their pilgrimage there in Sana'a instead of the Kaaba in Mecca, with the intention diverting the trade and benefits from Mecca to Yemen. Fair enough. It's an economic enterprise, and religion, politics, and economics are all related to the same thing. He presented his idea to the king of Ethiopia, who agreed to his idea. No big surprise there. So the house, this church, was built, and he named it Al-Qulais. There was no church of its like at that time. Then a man from the Quraysh tribe of Mecca came there and was infuriated by it. So he relieved his nature, he relieved himself on the walls, soiling them, and went away. So he urinated and defecated there. When Abraha saw this, he could not control his anger anymore. He was livid, and he raised an army to invade Mecca and demolish the Kaaba. Now, fair enough. As a Muslim, I obviously find fault in what Abraha is doing. But as someone who is not tied to this faith, none of his behavior so far seems out of the ordinary. Because somebody came and disrespected or defiled what he gave value to, and as a response, he's going to attack back. Fair enough. For his followers, he may as well be a hero, but for Islam, he is an invader or a villain. So he's going to invade Mecca and demolish the Kaaba. He had in that army 13 elephants. Now, elephants are a big thing when it comes to the army, especially during this time. One of the elephants was called Mahmud, which was the biggest of them. And as far as I've read in my accounts, Mahmud was his elephant. He would ride upon Mahmud. So that army proceeded, and none amongst the Arab tribes that faced them but was killed and defeated till it approached near Mecca. So nobody could stop this army. In another account, it says that it had an army of 60,000 men and 13 elephants. That's a huge army, given the standards and size of Mecca at the time. So it's hard to look at it that way. Robert Berry, thank you so much. Robert Berry joining us from the United States. So it's hard to think along those lines because this was such a huge army. Then there took place negotiations between Abraha and the chief of Mecca, who was Abdul Muttalib bin Hashim, who just so happened to be the grandfather of Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he was a gentle, sort of good-looking, handsome type of a man. He wasn't a warrior type of person. He was a negotiator, a gentle speaker. And it was concluded that Abraha would restore the camels of Abdul Muttalib, which obviously happens. I'll take over your camels as I invade your lands. That happens all the time. He would restore the camels which he had taken away, and then he would decide himself with regards to what to do with Kaaba. In another account, which I use from this website Quran.com, if you read the details of this chapter, it tells you that there was a back and forth, and there are multiple references about this. This is a back and forth, and the Prophet's grandfather, the the chief of Mecca at the time, there was a back and forth between them, and the Prophet's grandfather would say, "I'm here for my camels. Kaaba has an owner. That owner is going to negotiate or deal with you however he deals fit. That is not for me to protect." And while leaving, a prayer was said to God upon that. So Abdul Muttalib ordered the men of Mecca along with to evacuate the city and go to the top of the mountain along with their wives and children in case some harm should come to them from the invading oppressors. Yep, makes sense. Then that army moved towards Mecca till they reached Mahasir Valley. And that's interesting. So they reached a valley, and then in one account, Mahmud the big elephant stopped giving way towards Mecca. He would refuse to move. It would refuse to move despite all the pressure on it. While the army was marching towards Mecca in the middle of the valley, suddenly it was overtaken by flocks of birds, flocks after flocks, air raiding that army with small stones, slightly bigger than a lentil seed. Tiny stones and tiny birds. As far as I'm aware, the bird that we refer here is called the ababil, which is a tiny, tiny bird with a bit of a beak and carrying tiny stones. But this is the miracle of the Lord, and it's not just in this book. You see similar miracles in every book, in all kinds of religious texts. Tiniest bird, tiniest stone against the largest of mammals, the elephant, and they're no match. This is how God shows his miracles. There never fell a stone on a soldier except it dissolved his flesh and burst it into pieces. So they perished with a total destruction. Abraha fled away while his flesh was bursting into pieces till he died on the way back to Yemen. Such was the victory bestowed by God to the people of Mecca, and such was the protection by him for his house. This is narrated from the Tafsir Ibn Kathir, Surah Al-Fil. I'm not a Muslim, but your presentations are always so interesting. I like to hear them. Katerina Turkina, Professor, thank you so much for joining us. I'm not a Muslim, but your presentations are always so interesting and like to hear them. And Professor, if I may say so myself, you've joined at a very, very interesting chapter of the Quran right now, because this is talking about this wonderful story that took place in the same year when Prophet Muhammad was born. And I was just describing how the invaders were dealt with by God. This is obviously in Islamic folklore. I'd like to read from Quran.com what it says. And it says this in the middle. After making these supplications, Abdul Muttalib and his companions also went off to the mountains. The next morning, Abraha prepared to enter Mecca, but his special elephant, Mahmud, which was in the forefront, knelt down. It was beaten with iron bars, goaded, even threatened, but it would not get up. You can't really force an animal or human to do something when they don't want to do it. When they made it face south or north or east, it would immediately start off. But as soon as they directed it towards Mecca, it knelt down. In the meantime, swarms of birds appeared, carrying stones in their beaks and claws, and showered these on the troops. Whoever was hit would start disintegrating. According to Muhammad bin Ishaq and Ikrimah, this was smallpox, which was seen in Arabia for the first time in that year. But if you don't agree with that or don't believe it, that's not the point. You can pick it apart analytically, but the core is important. Ibn Abbas says that whoever was struck by a pebble would start scratching his body, resulting in breaking of the skin and failing and falling off of the flesh. Sounds like smallpox, but it could be something else. In another tradition, Ibn Abbas says that the flesh and blood flowed like water, and bones in the body became visible. The same thing happened with Abraha too. His flesh fell in pieces, and there arose boars on his body, emitting pus and blood. In confusion, they withdrew and fled towards Yemen. Nufail ibn Habib narrates, whom they had brought as guide from the country of Khatam, was searched for and asked to guide them back to Yemen, but he refused and said, "Now where can one flee when God pursues?" The split nose, or Abraha, is the conquered, not the conqueror. Now, this I found to be very, very powerful. And it's a very interesting story of the time because one may say this is the story of a miracle, the other might say this is folklore. Whatever the case is, whether you believe it happened or didn't happen, as far as parables go or as far as stories go, it kind of rings true with a lot of stories that we've heard in other religions, poetry, older texts, and the metaphor is also quite clear. You have the smallest of birds with the smallest of seed type stones in their beaks and claws, and you have the large, huge animal, the elephant, as the conqueror. But whoever ends up winning is, you start seeing the asymmetry, because what can you do from the ground to a bird that is flying miles above? Nothing. And you use the force of gravity, the smallest of stones becomes a bullet. So that part is believable. The breaking out into smallpox and skin falling off, as a Muslim, I believe it. As a critic, I do raise my eyes to it. So how does that work? But I believe in God and the glory of God. So if God says in the book that is how it happened, I tend to believe it. But the rationalist in me would say, how does it happen that smallpox and skin falls off and you can see the bone just by the drop of a stone? But that is my limited rationalist understanding. Whether it's right or wrong, I cannot prove or disprove it. So I'm not going down that route because I can't prove or disprove it. What I can say is that the gigantic elephant can be brought to its knees with the smallest of pebbles, as long as it's thrown from a high enough angle. It's like a bullet, and it starts hitting the people, and it starts hitting the animals. Magic and wisdom often go together. Absolutely, Professor. You're so right. You're so right. It's hard to dissociate them from each other. You're so absolutely so right. So this is the context, and in many accounts it says that Prophet Muhammad was born 50 days or a couple of months after this event happened. So it was common knowledge. That is why when it comes to the chapter, it wasn't described in too much detail. That now that you know the story, and I understand that I've taken slightly longer in explaining it, the story goes like this. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Have you, O Muhammad, not seen how your Lord dealt with the owners of the elephants, the elephant army, which came from Yemen under the command of Abraha al-Ashram, intending to destroy the Kaaba at Mecca? Nice summary. Did he not make their plot go astray? And he sent against them birds in flocks, striking them with stones of sigil, baked clay. And he made them like an empty field of stalks, of which the corn has been eaten out by cattle. That's it. This is the chapter. This is it. This is all there is to the chapter. 5 verses. But you see, in theory building, which I engage in times, parsimony is an important concept because you have to be able to communicate swiftly, cleanly, and clearly what you're trying to say. 5 verses are enough to paint the picture. And if you want to dive in deeper, obviously there are pages and swathes of what actually happened. So now this is interesting. Last week, we talked about you go your way, I'll go my way. And we used the example of Abraham and Lot from the Bible. And now we're looking at something else that has happened. So if we tie it in terms of concepts, last week, the previous revelation to Muhammad was all about you go your way, we'll go our way, or I'll go my way. And now is a parable, is an example of if you attack us, this is what happens. What happens? Well, let me tell you this story from your recent folklore. This is what happens if you attack us. Do you see what I mean? I wouldn't say it's a militant stance yet. Maybe it's a strategic one, but it is much stronger and defined than the original stances of love and brotherhood and compassion and empathy that the earlier chapters were referring to. Now, all of a sudden, now that Muhammad, peace be upon him, his voice is becoming more renowned in society. They're saying, oh, wow, Muhammad is not backing away. What do? Let's try to bargain. Let's threaten. Let's cause him pain. When that doesn't work, and Muhammad says to them clearly, I will not worship your God. You will not, and there's no bargaining happening. Go your way, I'll go my way. That's the first step. But obviously, when divide happens, conflict follows. Fair enough. So the next chapter is about a conflict that explains from the God of Muhammad, from that perspective, if you attack my house, I know how to defend my house. That is the perspective that Allah, the God of Muslims, is putting forward here. If you attack my house, I can defend it. And you can bring your elephants or your tanks, or you can bring anything you want. I am the Lord, and I can protect whatever I want to protect. And this is my house. This is the message that is going. So what is associated with this house of God is the message of God, which Muhammad is spreading in the land. Isn't it interesting? The previous chapter was about division of thought. No compromises or overlaps. It's a division of thought. No, this is what Muslims believe. This is what you believe. You believe what you want to believe, and Muslims will believe what Muslims believe. One division. And the next revelation, if you attack us, or if you attack the house of the God of Muslims, or if you attack, and the house is obviously a metaphor. It doesn't have to be just an attack on Kaaba. It is an attack on the ideals and central tenets, the foundation, because the house is the hearth and the hearth is the foundation. The attack on the hearth of Islam, this is how God will react. It is up to God to defend and protect his house. And if God is appointing a messenger to spread a message, then it is up to God to protect that foundation. I think embedded in this chapter and in this folkloric story of Abraham, this is the main message. Because in the previous week, and this is why I'm reading the Quran in order of revelation, because we are building our understanding from this one merchant in a cave at night, unhappy with life, not clear with all the answers, finding the truth or the truth that fits him. Now to it becoming an established ideology with a foundation and a center. How does one protect that center? Because obviously, when you establish a center, the opposition will attack it. That is human nature. That is nature of physics. That is the nature of all things. Opposition, competition, attack, defense. This is part of existence, of physics. So we can't put an end to it. But through the messaging in the book, it's being put out very clearly. Isn't that exciting? It's so interesting to me how this whole religion of peace and compassion and love, but if you attack us, if you attack this foundation, then we will defend it like we have defended it before. And this is a reminder at the same time to Muhammad, peace be upon him. And God does that to Muhammad a lot, because when you don't know, when you haven't seen this Lord, you're following blindly, and blessed are those who don't see but believe. Have you not seen how your Lord dealt with the owner of the elephant? It is invigorating the faith in Muhammad. It is telling Muhammad to believe, now we have divided ourselves. Now they're going their way and you're going your way. So now do not feel insecure, because we are here to defend this collection of ideas. That is important. And then it's just the whole story. And this is what the Lord will do. And now the Lord's examples are scattered across all books about his miracles and about his punishments. They're scattered. So I don't look at them positively or negatively. I know, for one, I wouldn't want to come against God in any confrontation. In every confrontation, I am losing. I don't say that about any other entity in the entire world. But when it comes to God, I submit wholeheartedly, absolutely. There is no contestation, and I wouldn't want to come against God. And I always beg and beseech for miracles and love and care and graciousness, and give me all my dreams and wishes. And I wish that to all of you as well. I hope you get everything that you want in life, and you find joy and happiness and peace. But the story here is about, we've divided our ideological schools of thought. Now let's make it clear that we are not wasting time. We are defending what we have created. And if you choose to attack it, you do so at your own peril. A new somber tone has entered the domain. It was there before, but there was a lot of compassion and love. But now, since the context is changing of the religion, this new tone has also emerged. So now we have to look at the religion in that manner. Next week, we will be looking at Surah Falaq, and then Surah Nas, and those are two very important chapters of the Quran. Also, Surah Falaq is the daybreak, and Surah Nas is about mankind. And those are the last two chapters in terms of arrangement. But as you see, in terms of revelation, they are much, much earlier. And then after that, we will have Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is titled The Purity, which is one of the central chapters of the Quran. It is a fantastic chapter, and it's one of the first few which are memorized by every Muslim. So it's a very important chapter, and I think just 4 verses, but it is so powerful. Like, I can show you, this is the chapter, and this is all that's written upon it. So it's a very important one. So the next 3 weeks we'll be covering this section of the Quran. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful Friday. Have a wonderful weekend, and stay safe. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.